I have here this Degas here, and it's rehearsal of a ballet on stage. And as you can see, it's original, and it's worth over $5 million. And I took a photocopy of it here, and I think that it's a pretty good photocopy. You can enjoy it quite well. But unfortunately, this is only worth probably the paper it's printed on. But I often ask myself, why is that? Because I can get a lot of enjoyment from this as well. And then you say, well, Nicole, it's not the same. Actually, you know, you're missing all the fine brush strokes of the paint, and you don't see the beautiful quality of the paper. And then I said, but then you haven't seen this. And this is my Red Noir. And this is another beauty here, worth in millions. But I have here a copy, which is only worth a few $1,000s. But why is it that you would probably enjoy being with my original and not with the copy? And then tonight I'll be speaking about NFTs, and I asked you, well, here I know you're going to tell me that the oils, the strokes of the paintbrush are not the same, and it's maybe of a different year, so that's why you don't enjoy it as much. What if I tell you I'm going to share some other art with you that is an exact copy? Because with digital art, you can make a copy that's really quite similar, it's not the same as the original. But why is it that one of them will be worth in the tens of millions and the other will be worth nothing? So what is it about it that people like to spend their money, if you will, on the original that? And I was actually one of the advisors to Bernard Arnault. We worked on a lot of the brands at LVMH. And that was the question we had. What would it take to get people to want to spend money, if you will, on something that they believe enhance their lives? So to begin this discussion tonight, I'll be talking about the symbiotic relationship between luxury and NFTs. I'm going to be sharing how luxury legitimizes NFTs, but how NFTs solve a lot of the challenges and allow for new opportunities for the luxury market. Now, first off, to begin this discussion, we must say, well, what is luxury? People say that it's rare, something's exclusive, prestigious, authentic, high levels of symbolic and emotional economic value, and a lot through customer experience. And often it's associated with something that's not essential. Although obviously artists would differ, but so the roots of really luxury, I'll say, is in art, because that in many ways is probably the quintessential non-essential in the physical sense of the word. So when you talk about art, you talk about this notion of provenance and authentication. And as I said, what we saw before my $5 million painting here, it's the authentic one that made it worth so much more than the copy. But I say it's imperfect science. Why is that? So in 2012, I had the privilege of putting together some art collections that were on, that we auctioned through Christie's and Sotheby's. And one of the pieces that I put together in the auction was actually something, it was from a pretty well-known Chinese painter named Stanford Chang, who was a friend of my grandparents. And he was over their house one weekend, and he worked on a painting. And if you'll notice this painting, it's quite interesting. You'll see there's a mistake. This lady actually has two right hands. If you look on the left hand, you see that the thumb is in the wrong direction, right? So it's actually two right hands, which should be the left hand. And so the painter, after he worked on it, kind of saw his mistake, and he left this painting at my grandparents and said essentially like, well, just didn't take it. It's kind of like put it in the garbage because I made a mistake in taking it. So my grandparents didn't throw it away. And so I thought, hey, this is pretty good. So what was it that we were able to get this authenticated and sell it in the six figures for that? And so what we had here was basically I had this thing, and I was working with the auction houses, and they're like, so how'd you get this? And so I had to really just like kind of asking people kind of come up with how the artist happened to be at my grandparents' place a certain weekend. And it was really, you know, asking parents and hearsay, and my grandparents weren't around at the time, but there was really no perfection to that. So to show where this leads, this is a very famous case of a Picasso forgery in LA area, and it was Femme Chapeau Bleu, and it was sold as part of the Malcolm Forbes estate. And so the word, you know, just was, oh, the Forbes estate, etc., sold for about $2 million. But in actuality, just years before, the dealer had hired someone to paint it for $1,000, and it was later discovered to be a forgery. So this word provenance, which comes from French words, where did it come from? And it's really about the journey of a piece of art. A lot of times on Chinese scrolls or paintings, when it passes through, someone puts their chop on it. And oftentimes they might write notes and then chop it, like the emperors that link that, to say this like kind of shows the history of something. So it's very important, the provenance, to determining the value of painting, because that and because that kind of makes it help is part of the authentication process, if you will. I was involved in putting together an auction of some ivory pieces, and when they were asking me sort of, well, what is the provenance? How did that come into your possession? I, you know, very quickly went to go look up and confirm what I thought, that for those of you know, any ivory that's imported in the U.S. before 1989 or after 1989 is illegal, right? So you can be sure that the ivory pieces that we put in the collection came into the U.S. well before that time. And otherwise the auction houses can't be sold on the market. So when you can get this right, you can, this is one of the Picasso's that found that was one of the highest pieces in auction at the time at $179 million. And you take pieces like the Mona Lisa, which have been authenticated and can't even be sold on the market because they're considered like national treasures. And with art, people come from all over the world to line up to see it, because this is that unique piece. And there are special spaces created to look at this. So now luxury brands, another form of luxury, they look to the art a lot to essentially, I call it making the essential non-essential. What is it that you can take a timepiece like a watch? What makes it either a $10 timepiece become $100,000, $1 million timepiece? I mean, there was actually a very interesting story. I was actually with a Swiss watchmaker, and he didn't understand how watches could be sold for $10 in the streets of China. So to humor him, we went out and we got some watches, and he took it apart, could not believe the quality of what he saw, and actually changed some of the processes. But what is it that indeed one can command different values in the market? So always, we work with different artists. This is a Japanese artist to come up with this, and this makes a handbag maybe costs of production, I mean just the raw leather in the, let's say, hundreds, if you will, to allow a bag like that to go for about 10,000 retail. Or the Hermes Birkin bag, which was the highest bag ever in auction at $300,000. What is it about this notion of uniqueness or exoticness? One of the pieces that we were working with, for example, we had a mink that was we put in an oxygen tank without oxygen chamber, and we coated it with like gold paint, and you can imagine trying to train our sales force to be selling such a piece like that, when for them it was really very non-essential, if you will. So further, the brands go even further and go right into the art world itself. And this is one exhibit we worked on in the National Gallery, and we did this hot air balloon thing, which is the notion of taking you to iconic places that touch this brand and throughout from that 1854 to the present 2011, and things that the people and symbols that it was. And here is Christian Dior. We worked with the Women's Contemporary Gallery, and we worked with 20 contemporary artists from China And sort of said, what is your interpretation of the art? And all of this goes back to the point of luxury brands. They are looking for, how can you take the ordinary and make it extraordinary? How can you take the bag, the watch, the wallet, which have utilitarian uses, and make it that special thing? So we look a lot to the art world for this. And this is just different interpretation of dresses. And if you will, the brands have been able to turn their stores into what like a museum is. So this is a typical line you'll see outside of Chanel. So Chanel purposefully opens its store doors oftentimes like half an hour or an hour after the other stores, so that you kind of get this line phenomenon or different things. So it's very thought out in terms of how to create that feel. So now let's talk about where the NFTs come in here. So there's so many experts in this room here, but just for some of the key characteristics we'll be looking at is this notion that it's unique, not interchangeable, and you can trace the ownership on unique items. And I'll say items because it's not necessarily just a physical thing. It could be an experience, it could be, properties, different things. And usually the notion is that there's only like one owner at a time. You can't modify that. And that, if you will, addresses many of these issues we were just talking about in terms of what the luxury good companies are looking, or luxury companies are looking at. So they want something that's rare, exclusive, and prestigious, right? So you have a unique fingerprint to this NFT. And one of the challenges in creating a product is it's finite. So when let's say you sell someone a purse, you don't go into their house 2 years later and say, okay, I want that purse back, right? It's the time is kind of one or zero, right? Whereas now with NFTs, you can limit the duration. So the whole product that you're offering can completely change. The authentication, it's unique and immutable there. And then the provenance, with the transactions being recorded, you don't have to be guessing and putting together all the pieces of, let's see, who had this before, because a lot of pieces of value come from who owned it before. So with this being ability to be able to track, it solves a lot of that. And now, because you can track it, put things where there's royalties to artists, it's very easy to do that. So you're seeing a big place in music with this.
The connection with
the community fan base, that is so much of what makes brands. So, I lived in China for 11 years. I was the first person from headquarters to go into China because many years ago, people thought I was crazy when I said the Chinese is going to be one of the next big consumers. And a lot of people didn't believe me. And so I became the first one from headquarters to go into China and to break us into the market for the Chinese consumer around the world. And so much was about, okay, understanding what did the fans want. And we had, clients that, for example, wanted to every pair of LVMH, LV shoes, or somebody I was translating for someone about some bags on a wall. And I said, okay, well, which one do you like? After I explained the difference, she said, I'll take the whole wall. I want everything. And they want to collect it. They couldn't possibly even use or wear all these things, but it's just such a thing about the community fan base here. So with NFTs, it allows new fan bases because it's a different fan base typically, and modes of interaction with them. And then we won't have time to go into tonight, but there are huge supply chain issues in the luxury good market, because if it's unique, and for example, let's say, so I spend a lot of time in the duty-free space, so there are very strict rules about where something can touch and duty-free. So the question would be, if someone buys it, can I get it to them, before they get on the plane, like if they're here versus there, and all the logistical issues. So NFTs, because they're so easy, quick, right? If you will, it crosses borders and different things. And you can imagine like another issue, let's say with watches, luxury watches, when one of the biggest issues we had in terms of, let's say the Chinese community buying watches was when there was a problem, they didn't trust that when they sent the watch back, that it wouldn't get swapped on them. So we had to set up a whole center of Swiss watchmakers that we brought in to say, okay, you can either physically join the piece or in country where we will be, making sure that we give supply after. So I just want to share the NFT market has been crazy in 2021. I just want to share for some of you a bit about it and sort of give us some thoughts about where it might be going. So this is the first 5,000 days, every day, first 5,000 days. And so for those of you who don't know, this artist every day did a piece of art, started with drawing and later on became more digital and put this together. And why this is historically significant, it was the first time it's ever been all digital art for prestige, and it was the highest price ever paid for a winning online bid for them. And now this one, the crypto punk. So this person who bought it paid $11.8 million for it, and he said he bought it because he liked the fact that it had a mask. It's the only punk that had a mask on, so a mark that it was during this time. Because a lot of it is all about, as you heard from the beginning, what is the story behind this and what makes this interesting. And this piece was, well, this guy has 3 accessories: the shades, the hat, and the pipe. I like that. So I'm going to pay $7.5 million for that. The apes, they all the apes, right? And these are just computer generated, and it's so you have what? So what this was interesting was that this came with when you owned it, right? You get some of these like all these bonuses. You get bonuses like merch drops or different access to a graffiti board. Yay.
And access to other NFTs that sit on top of that.
Exactly right. So and then well, I don't know why the video thing's not working, but people's cross promote. So this one actually that doesn't really need anyone after flash sale, but like this one went up 10 times in the aftermarket in just 4 months here. And this one, so now this, what I thought was really interesting about what we're seeing in this space is that this one, all the profits were used to go for a climate change nonprofit here. And then when the NBA Top Shot website came up of the NFTs, I think that was the first time you really saw a big brand name franchise putting a stamp on NFTs. So when in the beginning I was saying that the brand's luxury has validated NFTs, I would say the NBA franchise really is what kind of started this. And then we're seeing LV going into games there, and they're working with people. So once again, there's this collaboration with the artists. We have Burberry, and you too can buy your for your avatar, your little shoes, your fin, or your arm cuff there. And so the question I often get asked, is it worth it? And I think the only response to that is to ask yourself, is it worth it? Like, does that for some people has huge value? Maybe we should ask some of the owners or something. And what I really like about, and I'm just going to end here with Dolce & Gabbana. What I really like, so they have right now an auction going on still of about 9 pieces, 9 NFTs. What's really interesting about this, I think, is they're challenging the what the NFTs are linked to. So this notion a lot of the digi and the physics space. So not only, let's say if you were to buy this dress, you get the animation, the rendering of the dress. You are allowed to go in, I think you have up to a year to go get a dress made for yourself. And you get the sketch, and then you can, for a certain period, go to certain stores and do a 2-week exhibition of your NFT. Now, I've yet to quite understand if you wanted to trade it, how many could you up that dress again, or if it's kind of huge, but how would that change? But I don't know if anyone has kind of that response. But what I think is fascinating is how now not only have NFTs been able to address the challenges of a lot of the luxury brands, but they've also been able to add on new things. They can now limit, this NFT lasts for 2 years. They can limit the time. They're interacting with a new fan base. Now, what's been fascinating is that Louis Vuitton has been going through a different fan base than its typical client base, whereas Dolce & Gabbana had limited who can actually vote, or bid rather, on the NFTs, and they're trying to stay at their kind of more sophisticated, older fan base there. And with that, I will let you, I know I'm standing right between you and the buffet, but I hope this kind of opened your mind up about some of the creative things that one can do with NFTs.
Great.